Hi, I'm Nikki Fletcher, and in this session I'm going to be talking to you about raising awareness without alienating other people. First of all, I want to explain a little bit about who I am. Well, as a person, I'm a 50-year-old woman, not being able to have children due to the late diagnosis of very aggressive stage 4 endometriosis. I'm married to Andrew, and I'm a mum to 3 pups and 2 kitties. In terms of business experience, I am a writer. I've been writing for years. I'm a qualified life coach, and I'm also a business analyst trainer, which I did for about 15 years. I'm the founder, with Andrew, of the Childless Not by Choice magazine and also the We Are Worthy Summit. Just so you know what I look like, this is a photograph of Andrew and myself. I'm not doing this video to camera because I am looking so tired due to the summit and all of the work involved. And I thought, no, I won't subject to that. I won't subject you to that. Here are our pups. This is Bailey, Cartier and Duval, and if some of you have listened to the other interviews and things going on and also subscribed to the magazine, you'll be familiar with Duval because he often sings during interviews. Now, the reason for doing this particular session is that there have been some major changes in our community over the last few years, but particularly in the last few months. And I think a lot of this started during World Childless Week. And we've got Fertility Fest coming up in May, which is making huge differences to the community as well. And sort of trying to bridge the gap between the parenting world and the childless world as well. We have Childless Hour Twitter chat every Sunday evening, which helps deal with the isolation. We've got the launch of the Childless Not by Choice magazine. We've got this summit, and also we have countless brilliant blogs. And I should also have added in books as there. There are more and more books being published on the subject. And I do have to apologise if there are any typos and things that I've missed out in this presentation in the slides, because I was working on this at 2 o'clock this morning and I wasn't at my best. So we've had lots of changes in our community with more and more events taking place, which is brilliant. And it's had some brilliant consequences because basically we are finding our voice. We are starting to talk about what it is like to be childless not by choice, or what it's like to be struggling with infertility issues, going through IVF, dealing with miscarriages, and all of the other sort of shades of the situation. And this is absolutely great because it means people are starting to heal emotionally, because you can only talk out loud about these things, speak up, when you have got to a certain point in your healing process and accepting your situation. So all of these things are brilliant indications that people within the community are starting to heal, starting to embrace their plan B, their alternative life, and they are starting to speak out, which is brilliant. And all of this will inspire other people as well to heal. It will help them to heal. It will inspire them by knowing that there is an alternative way. Life can get better. However, it does cause some challenges as well, because as you start to get braver and want to speak out, you need to start to learn when to take action and how to take action. If you come across an article, let's say, which you find offensive or which doesn't portray infertility or childlessness in a real way, so you want to challenge something, and you've got to learn when to do that and how to do that. You need to pick your battles carefully. And I've put battles in inverted commas because I couldn't at 2 o'clock in the morning think of a better word, because really this isn't a war. It shouldn't be thought of as a war. I just couldn't think of a better way of explaining it. However, what I mean is that we need to remember that not every situation is an educational opportunity. Sometimes you just have to let things go, and that can be very difficult. You need to know when to walk away or when not to reply to something. And one of the things which will help you with this is accepting that your primeval brain can help you. Now, the primeval brain is the oldest part of our brain, basically, and it's the bit which deals with your fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, which is there to protect you. Now, when it was first really sort of developing and evolving, we were talking about being attacked by bears and lions, etc. And obviously, for the majority of people, that doesn't happen very often these days. And the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism hasn't registered the fact that in modern day living, there are very few occasions when we need to decide to either fight or run away from a lion. And it hasn't sort of caught up. So sometimes the primeval brain can cause us problems because it activates something when we really don't need it to protect us. However, often in these situations, you should listen to it, okay? Initially, at least. So if your primeval brain tells you to freeze or run away, actually stop for a moment and think, is this sensible? Is it trying to protect me, or is it being overprotective? And then you decide whether, okay, I'm actually going to respond to this comment or article, or I'm just going to walk away. But do sort of keep that in mind, that fight, flight, and freeze is there to protect you. However, sometimes we just need to make sure that our primeval brain isn't being overprotective. So this session is all about raising awareness. But whose awareness are we trying to raise? Well, most certainly parents. Time and time again, we talk about the fact that parents really don't understand what it is like. And we get all of those insensitive comments about, why don't you just adopt? Have you tried IVF? Having children isn't all it's cracked up to be. So we certainly need to be raising awareness amongst the parenting world. We also need to be raising awareness amongst children as well. Now, I'm not talking here about just cornering the child of your best friend and talking to them about it. I'm talking about something which is far more organised. And in fact, Jessica Hepburn, who is one of the founders of Fertility Fest, is starting to do that by going into schools and supplementing, if you like, the current sex education that children get at schools, to expand it so it's not just talking about the sort of the mechanics of getting pregnant and pregnancy and childbirth, or just focusing on how to prevent pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. She's actually going in and talking to children about fertility in general, and sharing with them some stats about, for instance, if you want to have a 90% chance of having 3 children, then you need to start trying to conceive when you are about 23. If you only want 2 children, then to have that 90% chance of having those 2 children, you need to be starting to conceive or trying to conceive when you are 25. And of course, this causes a bit of a dilemma, because we don't want to sort of be educating children to think that as a woman, if you want to have children, you must have those children when you are 20, 21, 22, because that would be a backward step. But we need children to be aware of all of these things, so that as they go through their 20s, they are more informed about the possible consequences of some of those decisions. For instance, if I had known that fact in my mid-20s, when I was about, I suppose I was about 26, 27, I didn't realise I had any infertility issues. However, I was getting older, and at that age I could have afforded to have some eggs harvested and frozen. And if I had done that when I was in my mid-20s, come my mid to late 30s, when we realised that I had got problems, I could have had some frozen eggs which were much younger, much healthier, and there is a chance that our one cycle of IVF could have been successful. So we're talking about grassroots education in schools, etc. here. Who else do we need to educate? Well, we certainly need to educate the media, because the number of times we read a headline about IVF, infertility breakthroughs, new techniques, and all of those sorts of things, it comes with a photograph of a baby or a pregnancy bump. And that puts off the very people who want to be reading that article from clicking through and reading. Because when you're feeling very vulnerable, you do not want to see those photographs. And we need to teach the media that that is the case. We also need to be teaching the media that when they talk about IVF, and they have somebody on the show, perhaps, or in the article, who has had their baby successfully, that they need to also put the other side there as well. They need to be sharing success rates. They need to be talking about the fact that these children are often termed miracle babies because they are miracles. Because if they're not doing that, they are perpetuating the myth that IVF is always successful, and that needs to stop. So we need to be educating the media to do that. And also, we need to be educating medical professionals as well, particularly if they ever go onto the television or write an article. We actually had an instance of this in the UK earlier this week. There was a mainstream television programme mid-morning, I think it goes on at about 9 o'clock actually, and they were doing a feature about infertility, and they had a phone in. And this one woman phoned in to talk to the show's doctor. So this was a qualified doctor. And at the end of the piece, when he was talking to her, he basically turned around and said, just relax and it will happen. And it's a case of, no, please don't say that. For a start, you don't know exactly at the moment what the woman's infertility issues were. Just relaxing isn't going to help if she's got low egg reserves. It's not going to help if she's got a blocked fallopian tube. And in terms of raising general awareness, what that doctor did was he was perpetuating the myth that, relaxation is a major cure for infertility issues. And there were lots of people, there were thousands of people who would have listened to that exchange and gone, that GP just said, relax and you'll get pregnant, which is what I've always been saying. So we need to be educating medical professions not to say those sorts of comments. And also, we need to be signposting them as well. So if somebody comes to their surgeries, they can say, okay, you're struggling with this. Have you thought of some peer-led support groups? Things like that, so that they can signpost their patients to areas where they can get not necessarily professional help, but they can get the peer-led support, which helps us deal so much with the isolation. We may also need to raise awareness amongst business owners, and I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail on my next slide. I want to just briefly mention here that whilst we're talking about raising awareness without alienating people, we also need to be careful about not alienating people within the communities as well. Because there may be times when you come across somebody whose journey, whose CMBC experience is not quite what you would define as somebody who is childless not by choice. And when that happens, you do need to be very careful not to disenfranchise those experiences simply because it doesn't quite fit into your definition of what it is to be childless not by choice. I'm not going to go into any more details than that because Andrew is going to be covering that in more detail in his event about pain is pain and loss is loss. So I want to just give you a few recent examples. I've already given you an example of the doctor on the television programme. However, I want to give you some examples of other things which have been going on recently, because this will illustrate why I think it's so important that we need to take a step back and think carefully about how we do raise awareness. The first thing is Mother's Day. Now, Mother's Day in the UK was at the end of March, and there was a supermarket in the UK which had decided it was a good idea to have a mothers only cashier, a checkout till open on Mother's Day. And obviously this caused quite a lot of dismay, anger, frustration within the CMBC community, and I fully understand that. And a few people posted comments on this supermarket's Facebook page, and two things happened. One thread, lots of people who were in the community answered or commented on that thread, and it was all very supportive of, yes, this is appalling, etc. There was no comment from the supermarket, and there were no comments from other people, people outside the community. So that wasn't going to be very effective in raising awareness, apart from perhaps alienating people, because a lot of the comments were about, this is absolutely appalling, this is so wrong, I feel so hurt, which are all relevant things. However, I'm not 100% sure whether that actually helps raise awareness, because the other thread, which I noticed, did have people outside the community posting. And I think almost without exception, all of those comments were then negative ones. It was from mothers saying, hang on a minute, this is Mother's Day. Why shouldn't we have an aisle which is just for us? There were fathers and husbands who were going, my wife works really hard. This is her one day, give it a break. And these are the polite comments that I'm talking about, and being very general. There were other ones which didn't. They were much more specific, and they were much more personal, and they were telling people within the CMBC community basically just, shut up, it's not appropriate, this is offensive, how dare you, and words to that effect, but much more strongly written. And this is really not helping raise awareness, because the people who weren't commenting were probably reading through that thread and going, actually, yes, I do agree with that mum or that dad, forgetting that actually this was people who were writing in the first place who were hurting, because it had been taken over by the indignation, if you like, of parents saying, stop attacking us. So we've got to be careful about how we raise awareness, because we do need to change attitudes. However, we need to do it carefully. Another example, which happened, this was a couple of months ago, was some family-only attractions, or attractions really, which you would have thought were open to everyone, but they had started saying that people on their own without children, a person on their own without a child, or a couple without children won't be allowed in. And this caused a lot of dismay, frustration, anger, etc. And people wanted to do something about it. However, again, it's got to be done carefully, because if you start saying, we demand to be able to be let in because we're not about to snatch a child simply because we don't have children on our own, it's not actually, I think, going to change people's attitudes. You need to work with the people who are concerned to try and find some kind of way forward which is acceptable to both people, both groups of people. So perhaps that might be saying that, on a particular day, people without children can go into the attraction, and everybody knows about that. And unfortunately, it is about compromise a lot of the time when you're doing this, and trying to find a way which is a compromise and suitable for everybody involved as much as possible, because you're not going to get everybody happy all of the time. However, if we are going to these places and saying, basically, we will not we will not snatch a child because stats show that this isn't what happens. It's not people who are CNBC who perpetrate these types of crimes. The parents who are worried won't necessarily be able to hear that, because they are just thinking, I've got a child, I can see somebody wander around here, which is basically a child-focused attraction. They don't have children. What are they doing? And they have got these fears, which are legitimate fears for them, and we need to acknowledge that it is a legitimate fear for them, and then come together and work together to find some kind of solution which works for everybody. And then the final one I want to mention is a government petition. And this again was in the UK, and it was talking about facilities at hospitals, National Health Service hospitals. And when I first looked into the petition, I was thinking, actually, this sounds like a really good idea. And then I looked at some of the things that they were asking for. And it was a case of, we want to have a separate waiting room at clinics for people who are infertile, because it is so uncomfortable, etc., for people who are infertile to be waiting in a waiting room full of people who are pregnant. And I do get that totally. I had a miscarriage, and when I miscarried, I had to spend the night on the maternity ward, and it was the worst experience I think I have probably ever been through. So I fully understand why people get upset about this. However, we need to be practical. In the UK, the National Health Service is on its knees. It is buckling. That sort of provision is not realistic. It would be in an ideal world, however, it's not an ideal world at the moment, and it's not realistic. And if you ask for these sorts of things, then the things which are realistic may not happen, because we've got a showstopper about providing a separate waiting room on the off chance that somebody will need it. So a better way forward for that situation is education of the staff, so that when somebody goes in and says, I've come here for my appointment, but I notice there are a lot of pregnant women in the waiting room, and this makes me feel very upset, the staff will know how to deal with that. So they can say, hang on a minute, I will go and see if there's somebody somewhere else you can go and wait. And then they don't forget about you if you've waited there. So we need to set realistic expectations as well, because there must be another way to do this. There must be a way of raising awareness without alienating the people who could potentially actually try and help us, because we've got to remember that we are in a minority. And raising awareness is going to take times, as in decades. When I think about our situation, I often compare it to the situation that people were in, so 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, regarding mental health issues. There was a huge huge taboo about the subject. And yet slowly things have changed. And the changes have happened from people within the mental health community, if you like, the people who are experiencing it first or second hand, raising awareness. And it takes time, but you can't do it alone. You've also got to find some way of connecting to the people who aren't experiencing it first or second hand, because we need their help. And that's why we've got to raise awareness initially without alienating people, because it's those people, the parents basically, who we need to be on our side to help raise awareness properly. And that means that we need to collaborate and actively encourage parents to be a part of the periphery of our communities so that they can help us bridge the gap. And this is something that Andrew is going to start working on quite a lot in the future, because Andrew was a parent. With his first wife, he had a son called Angus 29 years ago. Angus was born with a very, very severe disability. Andrew was his primary carer for the last 5 years of Angus's life. Angus died when he was 7 years old, and that was just over 22 years ago. So Andrew is in this unique position in a way of being able to talk to parents and say, I know what it's like being a parent. Okay, it was a very, very extreme form of parenting. However, I have been a parent. And yet now he is most definitely childless not by choice. He didn't ask for Angus to die, so he is childless not by choice from that point of view. It also happened 22 years ago when Angus died. So although Andrew hasn't lost the label of being a dad, from his point of view, dad is not just a label, it's an experience. And he will say to you, he was a dad, but he is no longer a dad because he hasn't had the experience of parenting for 22 years. His second wife, Paula, when he married her, they already knew that she had an inoperable brain tumour. She wanted to have children so that they could, Andrew would have something of her, a part of her in the form of a child after she had died. And Andrew eventually convinced her to take the advice of the doctors and not have children, because it would shorten her life. It may well have killed her. It may well have killed their unborn child. And then Andrew met me, and we discovered that I couldn't have children. So, from that point of view, Andrew is most definitely childless not by choice. It's what he's experiencing at the moment. It's what he associates with. However, because he did have the experience of caring for Angus for 7 years, he's got that experience of being a parent as well, so he can bridge that gap. And whenever we find people who are like that, and Sue Johnston, who we're doing a session on Sunday, so later today, about peer-led support groups. Sue Johnson is somebody like that. She went through a very, very long period of IVF and infertility. She managed to have one child, but the IVF experience and the infertility experience had such a profound effect on her that she now works as an advocate trying to make changes in Congress in the US about infertility and raising awareness and things. And whenever we find people like that, we should be embracing them and finding out how we can work with them to bridge that gap. Because quite often when we talk to parents, their attitude is going to be, you've not been a parent, so you don't know what it's like from our point of view. And we have to accept that, because we say to them, you don't know what it's like being childless not by choice. It works both ways, that understanding. So we need to be realistic, getting back on track. We need to be realistic about our expectations. So don't ask for the moon. We can't get that at the moment. Take smaller steps, set smaller objectives initially, and then gradually build up on the things. And we need to be objective about, or realistic rather, about our timescales. So what can help? Well, planning will certainly help. And what I'm talking about here is basically when you are feeling strong and able to do it, think about the different scenarios where you would want to respond to an article or a comment on a blog post, etc. What would be your trigger moments to say, I need to respond to that? And you do that at a time when you are feeling strong, so that you have planned in advance, because that will enable you to think things through carefully and basically look at the situation from all sides. So you don't have to jump straight in. When you see that article and you want to reply, you can think, okay, this article is about A. A while ago, I thought about how I would respond to A. Or this article is about X. A while ago, I thought about how I would respond to X. And then you can respond in a more calm way, having thought about all of the pros and cons of how you respond. So when you are planning your ideal world responses, what you do is you think about, are there any statistics that could prove your point? So, for instance, if somebody was saying, well, you're only 37, you've got years. People still have children in their mid-40s. You've planned your response in advance to that sort of scenario, and you can quote back at them the statistics that if you want to have a 90% chance of having 3 children, you need to be starting to conceive or trying to conceive at the age of 23. I am now 37, so my chances of having those 3 children or having the 2 children is going to be a lot less than that. So you've got your list of statistics there to help prove your point. You could also do a bit of research online and find some articles which support your point of view, or perhaps famous people who have written or spoken out about a particular point of view. And remember, all of this is done during your free time, if you like. You're feeling strong and you go, oh, I want to have a little tiny bit of a thought about how I can raise awareness when A is mentioned. What you may also want to do is identify if you've got any skills which need to be improved. So these could be language skills. Mine at the moment is verbal language skills. I'm struggling today, but that's because of lack of sleep and all of the work we've had to do with the summit. So I know that my language skills are usually better than this. I'm usually more articulate. And I also know that my written skills are usually better than that or this. There won't be as many typos in a slide normally because I would have had more time to proofread, etc. But you could think, I need to improve my language skills, slightly tighten up on my language because I use the softer language a bit too much. So perhaps you can rather than you should, those sorts of things. There are lots of ways that you can improve your language to help it be a bit more concise and actually start writing what you mean rather than writing what you think you mean, those sorts of things. General communication skills as well could be something that you need to improve on. I'm not saying that you do, I'm just saying that these are things that you could look at improving. And particularly negotiation skills, that could be something that you need to brush up on so that a situation doesn't suddenly sort of tip over into a major problem for some reason. Now, some of those sorts of things I'm going to be covering in the session that I am doing on Saturday, where I'm talking about some of the business analyst skills, techniques that you can use to help find your raison d'etre. So I'm not going to go into any more detail about those now, because otherwise I won't have as much to share on that particular session. So the last thing I want to mention is that I'm talking here about raising awareness without alienating people, and I've just skimmed the surface. However, I hope that it's got you thinking, and I hope that you are thinking, yes, this is something that I feel that I can do, I want to do, however, I need to find out more about it. So what's your next step? Well, this is when I'm going to announce the fact that we have a new initiative called I Can. It is very, very new. I have to stress that at the moment. It was a 3 a.m. idea that I had. It's something I'd thought about a little while ago, and then it really sort of took form about 3 o'clock in the morning 3 days ago. So we don't have anything properly planned yet. But what is I Can? I Can stands for Infertility and Childlessness Advocacy Network. And the idea is that we are going to have on the We Are Worthy Summit website a free membership area where anybody can join if they want to find out more about advocacy work. It's where people can find collaborators. I'm hoping that it will be people, your members won't just be people within the infertility and the CNBC communities. I'm hoping that we will encourage perhaps business owners, politicians, etc., to become involved, members of the media, GPs, etc., so we can get one place where people can all gather together, we can bounce ideas around in a protected environment so that we can actually plan how to raise awareness, what different aspects we can do, what's our first objective, how are we going to meet that objective, and all of those sorts of things. What I do stress is that this is not a support group for people who are struggling with infertility and people who are struggling with being CNBC. There are other support groups out there for you. This is for people who feel strong enough and are, passionate enough, inspired enough to want to reach out into the wider world and make the wider world a little bit more friendly, a little bit more inclusive for people who are either dealing with infertility issues or who are childless not by choice. If you want to find out more, there is a link below this recording for you to sign up to a mailing list. This is not a newsletter because we're certainly not at this stage yet. This is literally just the place where you can register your interest. When we have got the free membership area on the website up and running, we will then send you an email saying, it's up and running, this is how you join. And then we will sort of take it from there. You won't be bombarded by emails because I don't work that way. And also we never share your contact details with anybody else. I really hope that this has inspired you to find out a little bit more about how to raise awareness without alienating people. I hope that you are inspired enough to join us at I Can, because I think that this could be a really powerful way of raising awareness in so many different countries around the world if we can get enough members joining. It means that we are going to be able to coordinate things. It means that if we run some kind of initiative in the UK and it works, we can analyse what we do. Sorry, putting my business analyst hat on again. We can analyse what we do. We can create something which says, we did this, this worked, this didn't, and then we can send it to people in other countries so that they can take the blueprint of what we did and say, how can we tweak this and use this as a foundation for doing a similar initiative in my country? So thank you very much for listening. I hope that this has been interesting and inspiring as well. My name's Nikki Fletcher. I hope you're enjoying the summit. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye.